Everybody. I am Rick Noguchi. I'm the president and CEO of California Humanities, and I just wanted to welcome everyone to the Collective Joy Project. We're so glad that you're here with us today, and this space was created to honor joy in all of its forms. And this month, we are exploring a theme that runs deep, grief as a pathway to joy. So grief and joy might seem like opposites, but so often they live side by side. And we sometimes discover connection, healing, and even moments of unexpected light through loss. And that's what today's conversation is all about, and how we can make space for both. So we're really grateful, and a special thank you to our guest, Yumi Sakugawa, for being part of this important dialogue today. And now I'm turning it over to our host, Mariana Moscoso, to guide us through today's conversation. So take it away, Mariana.
Thanks so much, Rick, for grounding us in our topic today. Like Rick said, I am so excited to introduce Yumi Sakugawa, she, they pronouns. She is a second generation Japanese-Okinawan interdisciplinary artist based in Tongva land, the author of several published books, included Your Illustrated Guide to Becoming One with the Universe, and there's no right way to meditate. Her multimedia installations have been exhibited at the Japanese-American National Museum, the Smithsonian Arts and Industries Building, and the Peabody Essex Museum. Her newly released affirmation deck, Cosmic Comfort, is now out in the universe. Welcome, Yumi.
Hi, Mariana. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here and talk about grief and joy and collective liberation.
Yes, this is such a great topic, and thank you so much for saying yes to our invitation. So we do have an opening question that we love to ask our guests, and this is the second session, so it's only the second time. But we want to know, what's something that is bringing you joy lately?
I would say doing spending time with friends, spending time with community, going to community events. I feel like it's so easy to feel isolated and really overwhelmed with despair and grief and rage and other so many other feelings in this increasingly challenging political moment that we're all part of. And I feel like every single time when I take the time to step out of the house, to see people, to connect with others, then it's a really simple yet I think overlooked way to diffuse all the heaviness that we can sometimes be carrying in our bodies when we're spending too much time on the news or doom scrolling or being online and just dealing with the onslaught of really heavy headlines.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yumi, for reminding us that community is a deep source of joy, especially in moments of chaos and grief. Well, um, I do have another question for you. Can you share a card from your affirmation deck, Cosmic Comfort? And after you share this card, can you tell us why you chose it?
Yes. So my affirmation deck, Cosmic Comfort, as Mariana mentioned earlier, is out in the universe. It came out last December. And I chose the card Collective Future Dreaming because I think we need to remember that imagination is important more than ever. And I think oppressive structures want us to dream less, consume more. And I think it's also reflected in how arts funding is usually the first to get cut because it's seen as frivolous or impractical. But I feel like also oppressive structures are scared of artists and people with imagination because it challenges the old rules that seems like this is how it's always been. But imagination tells us that no, it can be different. And so I'm going to read this card. Collective future dreaming. We do not have to inherit the future created by the past. The future decided generations ago by unjust power that denied the well-being of the whole. We can consciously imagine, dream, download, generate, co-create, collaborate, manifest new visions and new paradigms of the future. A future we desire for ourselves and our communities, one that calls in new patterns of being, healing, mending, empowering, connecting. Dare to believe what is possible for our collective future with every fiber of your being. Live as though this collective future dream is not only possible, but inevitable.
Oh my gosh, Yumi, I love that so much. Yes, the inevitable possibility of expansive possibilities. I feel like that is such a powerful meditation to sit with um, in moments of grief. So, I know your work often holds grief not as something to fix, but as something to gently make space for. So, how do you personally experience the shape of grief in your art and healing work? And how has it shifted over time?
Well, I think one entryway for that is a concept that I talk about a lot in my books, as well as things I post on Instagram, which is having tea with your demons, which is a Buddhist concept, but I feel like there's a variation of that in all cultures, which is that instead of shaming or cutting off or feeling like you need to hide certain aspects of yourself that may seem undesirable or not pleasing for other people, we are able to experience more wholeness if we are inviting those parts of ourselves with self compassion and curiosity, and also recognizing that in having a conversation with these parts of ourselves, that part that we may feel ashamed or scared of, that's not the entire defining aspect of ourselves. It's just one small aspect of the very multi-layered, multi-dimensional selves that we all are. And so I like to take a similar approach with grief, which is that instead of being scared or ashamed or repelled by it, I think we can all experience more wholeness by gently inviting ourselves to sit with it, even if it feels uncomfortable, and to be curious about what is our grief trying to tell us. And grief, I want to also remind people, it's not just limited to death or the loss of a person, someone who passed away. It can encompass a wide variety of things, such as the loss of a relationship, the loss of your land, your homeland, the loss of language, the loss of a previous era or a previous version of yourself, or grieving the childhood you had, the childhood you didn't have. I also do have a cosmic comfort card on grief because I think it's important to acknowledge, because we do live in a grief phobic culture, and I think that's to our detriment. And I think also collectively we're experiencing a lot of grief with the unbelievable scale of violence that is happening here as well as abroad in other countries on such a massive scale. And I think we just have to find ways to metabolize it, whether it's on our own and also with other people.
Yeah, I think it's really wonderful the way you pulled in the concept of like from Buddhism of fighting your demons or like facing your demons. In Mayan cosmology, Xibalba, which is usually interpreted as the underworld, but etymology is like the place of fear and fright. And so who you encounter down there are like illness, anger, like these different emotions embodied into these beings, which are called the lords of Xibalba. And the hero twins go down to Xibalba and fight, and they play the ball game with the lords. And so part of it is they defeat them in the ball game, but the previous generation, the parent and uncle of the twins that had gone down there had been defeated. So it also talks about generational transformation of how grief and sadness and anger can be shifted over generations as well.
Oh, I
So,
love that. I never knew of this uh, myth. That's so amazing.
yeah, it's one of the remaining texts of the Maya called it's in the Popol Vuh, but it of course appears in material culture like ceramics and stelas. So, yeah, I love that you called that in the culture piece. So in your books and zines and teachings, you offer gentle rituals and practices for emotional alchemy. Can you share one practice that has helped you move grief energy into softness, presence, or joy?
Yes, so a really simple activity I do, I talk about this a lot in my workshops. It's called the morning pages. And so, as an example, this is like my yellow legal pad, and you can see all my scribbles, my illegible scribbles on it. And so, the morning pages is a concept by the artist Julia Cameron in her groundbreaking book, The Artist's Way. And it's basically writing 3 pages of stream of conscious writing every morning. And it's not thinking about quality or the content. It really is just generating words to get anything out of your system, whether it's something mundane or something that's irritating you or something that's just been weighing heavily on your mind. And so I really love doing that. It's something I do every day, and I always feel just a little bit of some kind of release when I do the morning pages. Another thing that's more specific is if, say, there is a conflict or maybe unfinished business with somebody, then it's writing a letter to a person, but not necessarily sending it. And the other thing that I did about 2 years ago is that as the genocide in Gaza was happening, my friends and I, we were all obviously very distraught by everything that was happening. And so we decided to do a a really small dinner, and we created a little altar to honor the martyrs in Gaza, and similar to how it's done in Asia, where we had incense and offerings of Palestinian food. And we all just took turns in a circle, just sharing what's been weighing on us, how this has all been affecting us. And it was a really powerful small community ritual that I think just brought much needed lightness afterwards, where we all just got to connect and laugh and joke, even in midst of just all the things that's been going on. And so something as simple as having a gathering, intentional gathering of the friends and community members, and just giving people that safe container to speak openly about what's been weighing on their minds as far as what's happening in the collective. I think something as simple as that is a really, really powerful tool to activate in these times.
Yeah, for sure. And I just to echo what you had mentioned earlier, how these systems are intended to make us feel isolated and alone, and how incredibly powerful it is to engage in community ritual or practice or even community creativity as a way to transmute emotions and allows us to also feel more connected to each other and also connected to ancestors, people suffering in a way that is generative, right?
Absolutely.
And that's the vision really of these conversations, is being able to have generative conversations about how the humanities can teach us about healing. So, how do you see your art, storytelling, and ancestral knowledge functioning as technologies for grief care and world building?
I love this question. I love the word technologies to describe storytelling and rituals. I think the power of storytelling is that it's an inherently connective technology. I think you're always the story you're telling, it comes from somebody, and when you're telling a story, you're telling it to someone else. Even if you're doing it just by yourself, it's a conversation that you're having with your ancestors, your past selves, with spiritual ancestors who formed your lineage of intellectual, artistic, creative, spiritual endeavors with land, with spirit, with nature. And so I feel like storytelling is an inherently relational thing. And because there's room for imagination and empathy, I think it challenges inherently the monotony of oppressive structures. And something I like to say always is that colonizers have no imagination, oppressors have no imagination, because it's I want to say a past Black intellectual said this, and I forget who exactly said this, but basically this person was saying how, 8-year-olds can understand the concept of murder and violence and fighting people. And so it's just so primitive, right? Domination, violence, dominating people, taking things from people. Whereas I think the collective liberation that many of us are seeking, it's so much more than that. And I think empathy just requires setting aside your ego to step into other people's perspectives, to realize that it's not just all about yourself and your own personal gain. And also in bringing in the wisdom and knowledge of not just ancestors, but also plants and nature and other species. I think there's just so much more that we can all do and be than what is offered to us by the systems of capitalism.
Totally. I love that you called in the imagination of an 8-year-old, because as you were talking, I was thinking about how children create stories so easily. And one of the people that I really love to like follow, he's already passed, but Joseph Campbell, which,
Oh
study
yeah, he's
myth,
great.
the power of myth. Like I'm a big
Love him.
I know. I love him so much. I feel like he's an ancestor as well, just by the the legacy that he left us, right? And I think one of the biggest lessons that I've taken from Joseph Campbell is that we are storytellers. Like that is the inherent quality of human beings. And not only are we storytellers, but we live in story. So
Absolutely.
understanding that power, that we're not just passive um, people experiencing the world, but rather we can be co-creators of that story, and how incredibly powerful to proclaim ourselves as a storyteller in a time when the narrative has to shift, right? And so I think it's like such a critical moment right now of um, what your work calls in, like cosmic comfort. And I love how you bring in the universe, right? Because it's so expansive. It's the unknown unknown, right? And it really invites imagination into our world building. And so I think that, in this time that we're experiencing such widespread grief, climate grief, political grief, generational grief, and I'll selfishly like plug in here like diasporic grief. Where
Yeah.
do you see openings for collective joy, and how can communities tend to grieve together without losing sight of hope and future possibilities?
Well, I feel like I always like to say that grief and joy are two sides of the same coin. And so I think somehow paradoxically, in gathering for grief or coming together for grief, it also is a joyful experience because we're also reminding ourselves and each other of the joy of being in community, being in solidarity, of being able to stand with one another as human beings. And another thing that I remember reading with the AIDS crisis during the 80s was that people would have these dance parties in midst of this horrific era, and it was the dance parties that reminded people what they were fighting for and why we need to celebrate. And these are the good things that make life worth living, that make the struggle worth being involved in. And so I feel like it just always goes back to relationships, being connected and daring to let other people into our lives and being changed by that. And I feel like that's the ultimate joy that we all get to experience in this very fragile lifetime. And I think it's just always remembering the relational aspect of collective liberation, whether it's on a small scale with like, oh, a bond with a neighbor or a new friendship you made through the community, to something more collective. Like I'm always like so moved when I see rallies and protests happening in other countries and other cities, because it really feels like even though we all are in different time zones and speak different languages, there is this common heartbeat of humanity that we all feel, that we inherently know is sacred and is worth fighting for.
Oh, that was such a beautiful gem. And I really appreciate your framing of grief and joy being different sides of the same coin, because it does the opposite of creating the binary. It makes it whole, right? And that you can't have one without the other, but rather than trying to purposefully extract them, is how these two things are what make us human, and
Absolutely.
have has us touch our empathy for each other, to acknowledge institutional systems that are harming us, right? And that we're actually one humanity that have a collective story, and that these, at the root of these stories, are themes that we can all relate to, and that we for generations have been trying to transform for the greater good through relationships, and not just of human kin, right? Plant kin, animal kin. I mean, I don't know. I have cats and I always call them people
Yeah.
because they are. They're
Yeah,
just
they are.
another type of people. So,
Absolutely.
well, before we close today, I wanted to ask you if you would be willing to offer us one small practice. It could be a breath or an intention for those navigating grief today.
Yeah. Well, one simple thing I heard that I read somewhere is if you, and this happens in breath work, but I think you could do it in your day-to-day life, which is that if you inhale twice through your mouth and then exhale, that's a really simple way to let your nervous system know that it's okay to relax. So it's like, and maybe just doing that for a few cycles. Um, I would also say I think just reaching out to someone, and I think it could just be as simple as messaging, texting someone, and just being like, and just sharing my heart is just really heavy with everything that's happening. And I feel like sometimes that just creates the opening for the other person to hold space for that or to say, oh my gosh, me too. And because I feel like vulnerability is what gives people openings to not hold the grief all within themselves. I really do believe grief is meant to be shared. And also, another simple thing I want to offer is just movement, anything that somatically tunes you in. I think just something as simple as taking a walk, going to nature. Lately, I've been a huge fan of restorative yoga to really give my body the container to reset and to calm my nervous system. I feel like that's just been really crucial in just getting through these days.
Yeah, I also love if you don't have someone that you can talk to or feel like you can't reach out to someone, that you can always use your non-human kin like plants.
Oh,
And if you need like grounding,
absolutely.
hold a rock, right? And tell the rock.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Talk to the trees, tell the ocean, tell the stars.
Yeah.
I love that too. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Yumi. This has been such an amazing conversation. And can you tell folks how they can attend your upcoming meditation webinar, Discipline is Pleasure, How to Create Structure, Habits, and Rituals to Build Your Creative Practice?
Yes, thank you, Mariana, for mentioning that. So, my upcoming creative meditation and ritual webinar, Discipline is Pleasure, is one of my most popular webinars, and I really love offering it because I just really want to give people a roadmap for how to create their own disciplined creative practice that does not feel self-punitive or overly critical, but is sustainable and abundant, and dare I say, even fun for you. Because I think a lot of us have really negative childhood associations with discipline. And so, if you go to my Instagram profile, my webinar sign up link is linked in there. And also, if you can't make it to the exact live stream time, you also do get a recording if you register. And the bird price ends on Thursday. So yeah, I hope some of you sign up and check it out and connect with me on the live stream.
That's amazing, Yumi. That's such a generous offering. Um, so thank you again for being here today. And for our audience, whether you're here live or watching the recording, we invite you to share one word or emoji of how this conversation has made you feel today. We look forward to reading and responding to your comments. And we'll see you next month, August 12th at noon. And please don't forget, joy is a strategy. Carry it forward. Take care, all.
Bye, everyone. Thank you,
Bye.
Mariana.
Thank you, Yumi.